What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Extreme Hunt Podcast. I'm your host, Taryn Hunt. Today's intro is going to be pretty quick because I want to get right to today's podcast with Jason Seegmiller. But before I get to that, I want to remind everybody, don't forget to go and check out the Nimrod Outdoors page. Nimrod Outdoors is a partner of mine and work very closely with them. Jeff Barlow is an awesome guy, and he's posting new content frequently. So don't forget to go and check out his page on YouTube and on Instagram and Facebook. A lot of cool stuff on there. Today's podcast, like I said, is with Jason Seegmiller. Jason, this was the first time I had met Jason, was this week, and had some great conversations with him. He's a great guy. He knows a lot about mule deer as well as elk, and he is a big mule deer guy, but I did get him to talk about elk for quite a bit of time and tell us the story about his Wasatch elk hunt. But really cool guy. If you haven't had a chance to check out his Instagram page, I strongly encourage you to do it. There are some amazing animals, and I put Jason up there with some of the top photographers in the hunting industry. The mule deer that he's taking pictures of are absolutely amazing. And so he shares some of his stories with us, his tips, tactics, and how he's doing what he's doing, as well as we talk about some shed hunting. He also makes a really good point. So Jason is a social worker by trade. That's what his professional license is. And he makes some great points about finding balance in your life. For those people that are on social media and trying to make businesses in the hunting industry, he makes some great points about how to find that balance in life and finding the joy and the passion that we have in hunting. And so I strongly encourage you guys to listen to the podcast to the end. He makes some great points, and I know you'll benefit from it. So without further ado, let's hop right into the podcast. If you guys have any questions, reach out to me on Instagram, send me a DM. You can send me an email at extremehunting.com, or extremehunting@gmail.com, or you can message me on my website at extremehunting.com. Thanks, guys, for listening. All right, well, let's get this thing kicked off. So, Jason, let's start by doing a little introduction. You told me before this is your first podcast, right?
Yeah, I'm a rookie at podcasts. So, thanks for letting me be the what do you want to call it? The test dummy, or
you're my guinea pig. Well, to be honest, yes, I'm a rookie at this too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. I'm your guinea pig. No, I'm still a rookie at this too. This is still kind of new to me, but it's a lot of fun, and I mean, it's always a good thing when you're talking about hunting. But for those people that don't know you, give us a little introduction about yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you live, a little bit about your hunting background, anything else that you feel interested or that would be interesting to tell people.
Okay, so my name's Jason Seegmiller. I currently live in Layton, Utah. But I grew up in St. George, Utah. I kind of grew up in a setting where my grandfather had a farm out in what was called the Washington Fields in St. George. Now it's full of big, giant homes. But back then, there was just open land where we could go down there. I'd be 12 years old. My mom would drop myself and my buddy off with our 22s and our shotguns and say, "I'll come get you in 6 hours." And it's a different world we live in now. But I grew up there in St. George. I had 3 younger brothers, and I really got hooked into hunting. I could say through my dad, but even more so through his brother, through my uncle. I had an Uncle Tom who was just crazy about hunting, and he had a bunch of kids. And fortunately, he always invited my dad to come along, and so my dad would bring us. And I don't think my dad would have taken us out as much if it hadn't been for Uncle Tom. But every year, the deer hunt was the family tradition. We'd hop in our different vehicles. I remember riding in the back of campers on bumpy roads with all my cousins and just going out for opening day, where everything sounded like a war zone. And we'd have big pushes. We used to hunt in very ineffective ways back then, but we'd do these giant pushes, and we'd have people spread out for half a mile, and shooters way up ahead, and we'd try to push deer to them, and just good memories. But that's kind of where I'm from. I'm from southern Utah. I live in northern Utah now. I've moved around some different states with different military assignments, but yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I have 3 teenage daughters. My oldest is taken off to college here in a few days, and then my other two are ages 15 and 13, and you could say I have my hands full.
I'll bet you do. With three daughters in the house, that's a lot. Are any of them into hunting, or are they pretty girly girls?
So my wife did not come from a hunting family. That was not, I guess, wasn't a prerequisite for me when I was looking for someone that I wanted to spend my life with. We could debate whether or not that's a good idea, whether you should have that. You should know what you're looking for sure when you're trying to find a spouse. But my wife didn't come from a hunting family, but she supports me in it. She knew it was important to me. My oldest daughter, she's gone out with me a few times on some different trips, hunting, shed hunting, but she wasn't too crazy about it. My 15-year-old, she's the one who loves it the most, and she's gone on different hunts with me. We've killed a few deer together. She's taken a couple of deer. She drew the youth in Eagle elk tag this fall, so she and I are both looking forward to that. And my youngest, I think she's still on the fence. She did get out with me last year. She shot a doe. That was her first big game hunt, and she liked it. But I don't know if it's to the point where she wants to be crazy about it like I am or her older sister is. So we'll see. It's not something I've forced upon them, but I give them every opportunity to come along and be a part of it.
I think girls see their dad going out and hunting and doing this thing, and it's kind of a natural attraction that they just kind of want to be with dad and see what he's doing. And honestly, girls can. I hope my girl. I've only got one, but I hope she gets into hunting because girls can be some of the best hunters. So I'm kind of opposite of that. My wife is a hunter. She comes from a very rich hunting background. Her dad and her brother and her entire family are big hunters, and she's a big hunter herself, and she has more patience than I'll ever have. I mean, she can sit on a mountain and just do just fine sitting there all day long and can outshoot me at times. I hate to even admit that, but she's pretty impressive. In fact, there was one time we were camping out in the Southwest desert, and we were just shooting 22s at camp, and my uncle and my dad were there, and they sat there and shot, and Sarah, my wife, outshot every single one of us to the point that my uncle was starting to cuss and swear because he's like, how is she doing this? She just pulls up and hits it center punches it every time. So these women, they can be pretty impressive.
They can.
If they want to be.
You can't count them out. You need to give them every opportunity you'd give your boys, I believe.
Yes.
And if they love it, you need to foster it. My daughter that's 15, I could tell she liked it. She was very patient and very curious on how to shoot a rifle, and we actually, I have a big unfinished basement, and 6 or 7 years ago when she was 8 years old, we'd probably have 30 yards in the basement, and we set up a pellet gun range downstairs. And she and I would spend hours and hours having competitions, just learning the fundamentals of marksmanship, and she got to where she can shoot. I mean, all of her big game animals that she's killed have just one shot right down. I remember I took her to her hunter safety quite a few years back. She was 11, and she did the course online, but then she had to go in for her day in the classroom, and then we had to go out to the range. And we went out to the range, and there was her, there was several teenage boys, and there was a handful of adults. She was the only female in the group. She was also the youngest in the group. And I guess the guy that was instructing the class, he had all the targets scored and gathered back up, and he started passing them out to the class. And he said, well, we had only 2 perfect scores. And one was this 40-year-old man, and the other one was my daughter, who was 11 years old. So,
oh my gosh.
I hope she keeps with it. She's got a lot of other passions. She's really good at basketball, and she has a lot of things she loves. So I'll keep inviting her and taking her along as long as she'll come.
Well, I've never met your family or your girls personally, but I've seen, looked on Instagram, you got a gorgeous family, and so I hope they do stick with hunting, if nothing else, just to be with dad and spend time with him. I know he's, like you said, you got one going to college, and those times if she comes back and goes hunting with you, maybe some of the best times of your life going forward. So
Absolutely.
you'd mentioned that you'd moved around a little bit in the military, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that. I didn't get to serve in the military, or I didn't serve in the military, but I have such a high respect for people that do and appreciate what you have done. I would just kind of want to talk a little bit about what you did in the military. Can you tell me a little bit about, what service line you were in, and some of the stories and things that you've done?
Yeah, I'd be willing to talk about that a little bit. It's my military career is not something I promote, or I don't post a lot about that on social media. But I've been in the military, in the Army, or the Army National Guard now for almost 16 and a half years combined. I started out as a military intelligence officer, and I did that for several years. That took us some different places. One of the places it took us was Monterey, California, where I was blessed to go and study Chinese for 18 months.
Oh, wow.
And I got to go spend some time overseas in China, and really had a great time with that. I came back from my experience learning Chinese and immediately deployed overseas to Kosovo, where we had a lot of intelligence work going on. And so it was a pretty cool deployment where I worked very closely with the Polish and Ukrainians. And so that was almost a year-long deployment. And then so I stayed in military intelligence for a couple more years, and then I had a great opportunity where the Army offered to pay for me to go get my master's degree and change career paths. So I went and got my master's degree in social work and became what the Army calls a behavioral health officer. And so since that time, I've been back in Utah in the Army National Guard. I'm attached to a big artillery brigade where I'm one of our 2 behavioral health officers for the brigade. And so we are responsible for the mental health needs and wellness of all the soldiers in the brigade. And so that brings with it some challenges and some great opportunities to be around the soldiers that have seen it all and done it all, and are working hard at keeping their lives in order.
That would be crazy. I'm sure the stories that you hear from those guys and the experiences that you have there are pretty impressive. So, well, man, that's cool. I really do. Like I said, I appreciate all the people that serve in the military, and that's kind of the reason I just wanted to talk really quickly about that and appreciate what you've done and continue to do and all that. So, well, let's jump into a little bit. Most people are going to know you from your Instagram page. I mean, I know you have a huge Instagram page, and you're always posting these pictures of these huge mule deer, and obviously you have a passion for mule deer. And I guess I'm guessing that is it seems like that's your passion, anyways.
So, I mean, I don't know what age it started, but I have been crazy about mule deer since probably 5 years old, when I got to have my first experiences hunting and in the woods, and that's just kind of what I grew up on hunting, and it became to where I've been convinced that mule deer are the celestial animals that were created with the very best of what God had to offer. And it's driven me nuts ever since. I think those of us that are crazy about mule deer, we all have our different ways of enjoying that species, enjoying whether it's hunting, shed hunting, photography, whatever it might be. You're right. Mule deer for me is what keeps me awake at night. It's what wakes me up in the morning, and I'm looking for every opportunity I can find to be out there, either photographing, videoing, shed hunting mule deer.
So why not elk? I mean, elk are huge. I know that's like the biggest argument in the hunting world is deer versus elk, but why not elk?
Well, in my experience, and elk are just too easy. See, a few years back, I
Oh,
drew a nice elk tag with only 2 points. I walked out opening day, shot a bull in the 360s, and I said, "This is just too easy." And mule deer just it hasn't been that easy for me to chase big mule deer and get them on the ground or find their sheds. So
I will
no,
admit.
I'm just kidding.
I know, I admit that. I agree with that actually, because when you go out hunting, looking for an elk, you're looking for a horse on the mountainside that's bright colored. You can't really miss it. Mule deer are definitely hard to see.
you know I've been elk hunting, a number of times, and like I say, I've killed just the one big bull. And I do love elk hunting. I'm excited this fall to take my daughter out on the youth any bull hunt. I don't know if there's anything quite like the bull elk rut in nature. I mean, so that's something that's hard not to be crazy about.
Hmm.
But I can't explain why a giant mule deer, does it for me, but elk not quite so much.
Well, while we're talking about elk, and since you mentioned that big bull elk, would you mind telling the story about that elk and how that all happened? If people haven't seen the video, they need to see the video. But can you share that story?
Yeah, so this was back in 2015. I had just burned all my limited entry points for deer the year before. And so I decided to go back in the pool and start putting in for elk. And I threw my name in the hat here in Utah for the Wasatch unit on the muzzleloader hunt. And lo and behold, when I checked my credit card, late May or whatever it was, I knew I had drawn the tag, and I just couldn't believe it. And so I was
Lucky
excited
bugger.
because the dates were prime. I'd never had a chance to hunt big bulls like that in the rut. Just my family growing up, and those that I hunt with, we just never hunted elk as much as we hunted deer. And so I was excited, and I put in as much time as I could. I had a few spots that I'd been out scouting. I saw a number of good bulls. I had one area in particular where I'd seen several good bulls, and when I say good bulls, I'm talking the 330, 340 range, which for the Wasatch unit, that's kind of the higher end of what they manage it for.
That's a good bull.
And so I thought, if I could get back in here in a couple of weeks, if they're still around, I'm going to be doing well. I had multiple options. Well, the rifle hunt took place obviously before the muzzleloader hunt here in the state of Utah, and my buddy and I showed up in the area where I'd seen them all summer and all fall, and we spent 2 days in that area, and there was just sign everywhere. We saw one lone bull, and everything else had just moved out of this giant area. But fortunately, I had a backup plan because I had a good friend who's since passed last year named Larry Maurer. If anybody's familiar with Larry, his handle on Instagram and on Monster Muleys was Yellum, which is Muley spelled backwards. He knew I had the tag, and a friend of his came to him and he said, "Hey, Larry, I've been out with some rifle hunters here on the Wasatch unit, and there was one nice bull that we could not kill it. We tried and we saw it every single day." And he said his friend ended up killing a different bull. It was a pretty nice bull. And he asked Larry, he said, "Would Jason be interested potentially in knowing more about this bull and where I saw him, and maybe have a chance to hunt him?" And so Larry relayed the information to me, and of course, I was as pumped as could be to get some more information and more options. And I went and sat down with this guy and Larry, and his name was Clint. And he showed me video of this particular bull he called Curly, because he had these big fronts that just curled way up, and just a beautiful, gorgeous 6x6, very symmetrical bull. And so he was able to give me GPS coordinates of where he'd seen this bull on each day of the rifle hunt, and the different canyons where he'd been moving around chasing cows. And so I had all that information in my back pocket, and when the area I had scouted, everything had moved out. So I said to my friend Nick that was with me on this hunt, I said, let's go clear across the unit and let's go try this area. What do we have to lose at this point? We're kind of out of options.
Yeah.
And so we drove clear to a more southern part of the unit, south of Strawberry Reservoir, and found a place to camp where we could hike into those drainages where he'd seen this bull. And the night before my hunt started, we got out on a peak and we're glassing, and there was just bulls bugling everywhere. I mean, there must have been 10, 15 bulls going crazy in every drainage that, was in front of us, to our left, our right, behind us. And so, needless to say, it was hard to sleep that night. But we woke back up the next morning and got back on our glassing spot. And right off the bat, just in the drainage to our right, there was this nasty, raspy sounding bull that just had one of those bugles that he couldn't even hit the high pitch. But he just sounded like a big bull. But he was over in some thick pines, and so we were moving in on him. We were probably 100 yards away from this bull, and all of a sudden, 2 muzzleloader shots rang out.
Oh,
I mean, it was within 5 seconds apart. And so all I can think, we never even did go and see what bull it was or who the hunter was, because we started going down the canyon after that, chasing other bulls. But all I can think was that the hunter had his rifle shot, and then maybe somebody else handed him another loaded rifle, and he shot again. But two shots back to back, about 5 seconds apart, and that was a little bit frustrating. We thought, geez. So we went further down the canyon. I had a nice bull that was probably in that 300-inch range, 6-point bull that we let walk. And then all rut activity just seemed to die, because this was 2015. We had a pretty hot fall. And before long, it was 70, 75 degrees in September up in the Quakies and pine trees. And that's just too hot for the rut to be any good during the heat of the day. And so we were a few miles from camp, and I just said to my friend Nick, I said, you know what? I know there's this water hole down the canyon. We need to find somewhere to kill the day until they start moving again in the evening time. Why don't we just go sit that water? Maybe something will come in before it's time to rut for the evening. And so we went, and we got on the tree line about 130 yards or so from this water hole, and we just sat there for 5, 6, 7 hours, and nothing came in. We took naps, we took turns staying awake, we ate our lunch, and then about 4:00 p.m., this younger 6-point bull came in and just spent about 20 minutes right there in front of us, wallowing in the water hole.
Oh, that's awesome.
The whole entire while, he's looking up on the hill, the ridge above him, and you could tell he was just nervous about something. And we kept looking up there, couldn't see anything. And finally, he just bolted out of the water hole. And right about that exact moment, the bull that I end up killing pops out of the ridge, or pops out of the trees up on the ridge to our left. And I instantly knew it was the type of bull that I needed to shoot on that unit. I didn't have time to add up the score. I just knew he was a shooter bull. He was every bit as good as any bull I had scouted. And if you've seen my YouTube video at all, this is the moment where the YouTube video kicks in. My friend Nick was probably more excited than I was, trying to hold the camera straight, and you can hear him on the video trying to keep me calm. And the whole while I'm thinking, well, you stay calm, I'm fine, and this bull works his way down the ridge. At one point, he looks like he's going to take off, and I almost thought about taking a shot at 200 yards, but this was the last year where Utah still required you to have 1-power scopes on your muzzleloader. And so I thought, 200 yards was kind of my max range, and on a big, beautiful bull, you just want to make sure you can and get a shot in the vitals. And so I didn't take the shot. Luckily, he circled back, and he winds his way down the hill, and I was ready. I had my muzzleloader rested on my pack, and here I was 130, 135 yards. He takes his first sip, and at that moment he takes his first sip, I just let him have it, and I aimed for the shoulder. It went right through the shoulder, right through the heart. And unlike most elk, I mean, he jumped up, hind legs kicking in the air, like you see a lot of deer do when they're heart shot.
Yeah.
And he jumped up and fell into the water hole, kicked around for a few seconds, and then went still. And I mean, we were hooting and hollering. It was super exciting. But the whole way walking up, all I could think about is, there's no way we're getting this elk out of this water hole. There's no way. I mean, how is the two of us supposed to get this bull out of the water? And so I'm thinking, during this 130-yard walk, I'm thinking, can we go find a sheep herder with a horse? What are we going to do? Like, I don't know. And it's hot, and we don't want to let it sit here too long. And as we start walking up on the bull, I notice the shape of his antlers and the curls, the big curls on the front. And I instantly realized that this was that bull Curly that we had come into the area hoping to find.
Oh, so you didn't know until this point that was Curly?
I had no idea. I mean, I couldn't. I was probably too nervous to sit there and analyze every point as he was coming down the hill towards the water hole.
Oh, wow.
I just knew he was a big shooter bull, and it was kind of overwhelming to realize that we got lucky enough that the exact bull we came into the area to find came into water opening day, a great shot, and it was pretty awesome.
How was it getting him out of the water? So I've watched the video, and the video is amazing. In fact, I'll put a link to it in the show notes to this podcast. So if anybody's listening, you can go and just click that link and watch it. But
it did throw it on YouTube, and there's a few shorter clips of it on my Instagram page. But it was about a 20-minute process with. I wish I would have set the camera and filmed it, honestly, but we were both down to our underwear. If anybody was on any of the surrounding peaks looking down on us, they got a nice show.
I'll bet they enjoyed it.
But we were in our t-shirts and our underwear, and we were just, luckily there was just some nasty, gross, slippery mud that would, we'd sink almost up to our knees, but it allowed, with every pull, it allowed us to slide it a little further across the top of the mud. And after about, it might not have been quite 20 minutes, but it felt like at least 20 minutes, we finally, just pure exhausted, we got the bull clear up out of the water on the shoreline, and that's where we had to process him. And that's where we had to cut him up, quarter him. We actually deboned so we could haul the meat back to where we were camping. And it was a long night. We got back to camp after an uphill climb with full packs through a bunch of deadfall and everything else. We got back probably after midnight. And that night, as I was studying maps, Google Earth, there at camp, I realized there was a Forest Service road, an old road, that was going to get us about a quarter mile away from where I killed the bull.
Oh, no.
So on the morning when we had to come back and get the antlers and the second load that we'd hung in the tree, we made our way around with the truck, and we got a lot closer. It was a short pack out, but quite the experience. I had a blast. I'd love to have another good elk tag and hunt elk during the rut. So
yeah,
I do have a general elk tag this fall. Maybe I'll get lucky again.
Well, there's been some amazing elk killed on that general tag. I know a lot of my buddies that are hunting there in Utah. They're killing some pretty good elk with that general tag. So I mean, nothing. I guess I shouldn't even say nothing like that. There was one that was, I think he was like a 370 or something like that bull that was shot on the general tag. So it is possible to get one like you got there on the Wasatch, but man.
And so my bull ended up taping out in the 360s.
That's a good bull for the Wasatch.
For that unit, it was about as good as I could have hoped for.
Well,
starting out and better than most. So I was tickled to death. It was a great experience. My only regret was I had a whole week off of work, and we killed it on opening day. So
well, that just means you get to spend the rest of the week just camping, right?
Yeah, we camped for another day and then went home and I didn't go back to work. I
I was gonna say if you went back to work,
just had
then man, we
family and
got
spent some more time in the hills. But
nice. Well, that story and that video is pretty amazing. And honestly, that bull could have been a 310 bull, but to find out that that was Larry's bull that he'd talked to you about, and I mean how that whole thing worked out. That's amazing. That is unbelievable, honestly.
yeah, it was a neat story, and I was so grateful that they shared that information with me, because after our initial plan kind of fell through, we would have been at a loss, and we would have been scrambling for at least a day or two to figure out our other spots,
Yeah,
whether or not they were elk or not.
yeah, for sure. Well, look at this. We see you're a mule deer guy, and we spent the last I don't know how long talking about elk. So hey, there's a spot for everything, I guess.
That is the longest I have talked to anybody about elk in probably the last 5 years. So
Well, good. I'm happy to be that person. We
hook
probably
me
should
in.
we probably should get back to your mule deer because honestly, like I said, if anybody looks at your Instagram page, if you haven't, goodness gracious, go look at it. But you're always posting these huge mule deer, and I know people keep things close to the chest, and you may not want to tell everything about it. But can you tell us about these big mule deer? What's going on with those things?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the deer that I put on my Instagram page, I don't have anything I'm trying to hide about where I shoot those videos. But I live here in Layton, Utah. I'm 15, 20 minutes away from what I consider one of the mule deer meccas in the world, and that's Antelope Island. It's a state park here in Utah where hunting's very limited. They've got great genetics. It's a big island that's 42 square miles. And when I have free time and I want to get my mule deer fix, I look up at the Wasatch Mountain to my east and I say I could go climb that rugged mountain there. And if I'm lucky, maybe see a 160 class buck. Or I could take a drive out west to the island, either drive around in glass, or I could hike on the trails and see what I can find. And on most days, at least luck into one or two big deer on each trip, sometimes multiple. And so that's just been a place for me it's been therapeutic. I still hunt deer down in southern Utah where I grew up. That's the general unit I like to hunt on down near St. George. And so it's hard for me to get down there and scout as much as I'd like. I'm not one of these guys that just has plenty of free time to be out every single week in the evenings, close enough where I can be out setting multiple trail cameras, tracking certain bucks. My brother's lucky enough that he's down on the unit and he does some of the scouting for us.
Yes, he does.
But he does. And there's some great deer down there, and every year we're trying to kill them. They're usually giving us the slip. But so where I'm at now, my way to enjoy my passion for mule deer is to go out and film some of these bucks on Antelope Island. And to me, it's been the ultimate study ground for big mule deer. I've watched some of these deer out there for 7 years now.
Wow.
And I have photographs of the same buck 4, 5, 6 years in a row. And it's fun seeing him change year to year. And so for me, it's just been one of the very few places on earth where I can watch mule deer grow up, change, and just really learn a lot about them.
Do you see a lot of change year to year? I mean, well, obviously you're going to see probably growth, but do you see a lot of change? And are you able to identify which deer you saw last year with pretty easily?
Yeah, I mean, when you spend a lot of time with certain deer and that frequent the same areas every summer, every year during the rut or the winter, you start to notice characteristics, whether it be scars, cuts on their ears, shapes to their antlers. There ends up being enough characteristics that you can tell from year to year, especially the bigger deer, what they look like from year to year. And so sometimes it takes me looking back on past videos or past photographs and realizing, oh geez, that 190-inch 4-point was this little 3x4 that I photographed last year. that was maybe 170, and he took a big jump. And then, I mean, it's fascinating to me. I've watched young 3x4 bucks blow up into big 4-point frame bucks, and I've seen 220-inch 4-point frame bucks with extras come back the next year with 3x4 frames, and their big side one year becomes the big side on the opposite side the next year. And so it's fascinating to me seeing all these changes. And with a place like the island that has the genetics that they have, it's exciting to think about what might pop up the next year, because you never know. There's so many good 190 to 205 inch bucks every year. You never know which one of those bucks is going to take the leap to become, the 240 inch giant or the 250 inch buck like last year that they killed on the hunt out there. And so for me, it's a fascinating place. And
Do you help on those hunts out there? Have you had a chance to be a
so
part of those?
I've known the different guides, whether it be Doyle Moss and his folks that have guided out there. I've talked to them over the years because I was also good friends with Larry Maurer. We talked about him earlier. Larry was in a wheelchair, and that was kind of what kept him going. For those that don't know, we had a motorcycle accident many years ago, and so he lived close to the island as well, and that was his place to go out. And he's the one that named a lot of the bucks, and he just had amazing catalogs of photographs of those bucks well before I ever started going out to the island. And so he was a wealth of knowledge for me, and he knew Doyle Moss real well. And so if Doyle Moss and that outfitting group was guiding the hunter out there, I would share information that I had. They had more access to the island than I do. Normally you have to stay on designated trails, so I can hike anywhere I want on the trails and glass from there, but I wouldn't have full access. But during some of the hunts, I'd be out there. I'd help glass. I'd help provide information on where I'd seen different bucks as they're moving around during the rut. And I'd help even share my thoughts on what certain bucks might score as they're growing. And then even last year, Wade Lemon, their client, had the tag out there, and so I got to know them quite well and provided whatever information I could to help them be successful as well.
Nice.
So that's been fun over the years, I've got to put my hands on either, like last year, the actual rack, or at least Larry always had replicas of almost every buck that they killed out there. And so I could go by his house and we could study him, we could score him, we could enjoy those bucks. So it's a special place.
Well, it's something that not many people get to do, is not many people get to see the class mule deer that you get to see on a daily, weekly basis, let alone being able to get out there, put your hands on them, be involved in them, know their names, and you made a comment. So you're watching these deer for 7 years. That's unreal, because being a hunter my whole life, I've done that. I've patterned deer. I tried to follow them. I've named them and all that stuff. But really, I think the max that I really get to is like maybe 3 years, 4 if I'm lucky, that I get to actually track a deer and watch his progression. I couldn't imagine.
Even that's tough to do.
It
in
is.
most units, even on limited entry type units that permits are lower in number. It's just hard for a deer in the wild to survive that long or escape hunters.
It is.
And
actually, I've had more success with that here in Colorado. So I've been here for 4 years, and I have a buck that I found the very first year that I was here, and he's still alive, because I haven't had a chance to get an archery tag. Drawing tags here in Colorado takes quite a bit, so I haven't had a chance to get him. Actually, I haven't really wanted it to really hunt him that much. He's a great buck, nothing like what you're looking at here on the island, but really good buck. But I've been able to track him the 4 years that I've been here, and so I feel pretty lucky to be able to do that. And I've seen him change. He's very identifiable. I've got, like, kind of how you said with Larry, cataloging them cataloging pictures over the years. I've been able to do that with him, but been able to easily identify him and see him grow up. And he's a nice typical 4-point. This year he did finally kick out one kicker on the one side, which really surprised me. I didn't think he would, but it's a pretty cool little hook cheater that he's got on that one side now. But
Sweet.
yeah, really cool to watch him over 4 years. But I couldn't imagine if 7 years. I'll bet you see a lot of changes. And also you made the comment of them going from a 3x4 and then to a 4-point and then going from 3x4 and then switching sides. So I did a podcast with Tyson Cannon. We had this conversation about, does a 3-point frame deer stay at 3-point? And obviously not, at least on the island.
Yeah. And I don't, the island, I'm no biologist, and I've watched deer change up outside of the island as well over the years. My brother has some bucks on his camera right now that we've seen for, at least on camera, for several years in a row, and they change up. But especially young bucks, I've noticed on the island, like you cannot predict if a big young 3x4 that might be 3 years old, that could be, encroaching on 180 inches as a 3x4 at 3 years old. You cannot predict what he might be the next year, because so often they'll go one more year and all of a sudden that 3-point side becomes a 4-point typical and is no longer a 3-point. And then from there they might get bigger, and for whatever reason later on they might revert back to a 3-point side on that side. And so I kind of have some opinions on how deer change, especially younger deer. I think outside of Antelope Island and in some of the other areas around the state and in the western states, we might perhaps underestimate or overestimate, genetics with 3-points, 3-point frame bucks. I know here in Utah, there's a couple of our premium units on the Henrys and on the Ponsagon. We hold some management hunts where in order to kill a deer on those hunts, it has to have at least less than 4 points on one side. And so I know a lot of giant framed 3x4 framed deer end up getting killed. And I sometimes question whether or not we're mistakenly killing younger 3-4-year-old 3x4 frame bucks that, given another year or two, watch out, who knows what they might grow into. But and those are some of my thoughts. I have no biological data to back that up, because I also see the bucks that they're 3 points when they're young and they die 3 points.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say.
But that's a good point though, because, and I'm just going to speak to the Ponsagon. I haven't really seen it on the Henrys as much, but on the Ponsagon, I've seen some of those 3-points that are shot on there that they are massive 3-points, and they're young bucks. You can tell that they're not very old, and so you kind of do wonder, give that buck 2, 3, 4 more years. Let's see what he could do, because obviously they can do it. They can grow and become that 4-point typical frame, or they can become that 4-point with a whole bunch of cheaters coming off, trash coming off of it. So I think you got a good point there. It'd be interesting to, for a biologist to do that and track some of those and see what they do. Are there biologists on Antelope Island that go out there and
yes, there are.
Watch?
There's typically, I think, one biologist that's out there full time. They get a number of student biologists that come through there. I've gotten to know a couple of them over the years. But they're studying not only the mule deer, they're studying the bison, the antelope, and some of the other species of wildlife that are out there. So it's not exclusively mule deer. But yeah, like you were saying, on a unit like the Ponsagon, I know with those management hunts that people are encouraged to try to look for an older buck that might just have those genetics of a 3-point on one side. Mm-hmm. But most of your average hunters aren't able to go out there and determine age when they see a giant framed rack that might have 3 points on one side. who's going to resist killing a 3-year-old deer that might be 180 inches as a 3x4?
Yeah, they. I don't think they could care less what
Can't
age
blame
it
them
is.
in
Yeah,
that
they're.
sense.
It's a huge deer. They're gonna shoot it.
But who knows if those deer were let or were allowed to walk, if we wouldn't have some more mega giants running around. It's hard to say.
You know,
Just
the th-
stuff to think about, I guess.
well, the thought of having another Antelope Island somewhere, because I agree with you. You made the comment that Antelope Island is the mecca for mule deer, and I don't think there's any other place on earth like it. It's very unique, but it's managed to be that way. But I think you have a great point here in that, if we were to manage other areas like that, could we have more meccas? Could we have more areas
Yeah, I
where
mean, we absolutely could, and I'm not sure we want to manage other areas like that because we want to give people opportunities to hunt. Right now, Antelope Island's so exclusive with the one auction tag every year and one public tag that, I mean, those deer they do have a chance to grow old. And
Mhm.
yeah, when I say it's one of the mule deer meccas, they may not produce even as big a deer as the Arizona Strip and a few other places, but it's a place where a lot of deer get big and die of old age. And there's no place like it.
Yeah. I've only been there once in my life. It was when I was in high school. We went up there and I was blown away. I mean, not even just like you had said, just not just the mule deer, but the bison and the plethora of coyotes that are on that island. And
That's we could hold a full podcast about my opinion on the coyotes out there and how
well,
unpopular they are, not managed whatsoever, and they kill a lot of the big bucks even on the island.
are they controlled at all? Is there anything that you can do with those?
No, no, unless they leave the island and get out somewhere where someone could legally harvest them. To my knowledge, there's no control for that. They just let them reproduce, and I've seen them swarm like wolves, killing does, bucks. A deer goes down, it will never make it till the next morning without being picked 100% clean. There's that many out there, and it's
Oh,
yeah.
if
I
you
mean,
don't,
there's different opinions on that. So a lot of the tourists love to see the coyotes, and so a lot of the things they do on an island like Antelope Island, that's a state park, they're managing it towards what people want to come and see. And I can't tell you how many times I'm looking at a 220-inch deer through my spotting scope, and some tourist will come up to me and say, "Hey, what you looking at?" "Oh, there's just a big deer up on the hill." "Oh, okay. I was looking for bison."
oh my
So
gosh.
see you later. And they have no idea how rare that animal is that's up on the hill. And how few places in the world you can go and see a mule deer like that. But so they manage the island really cater towards the tourists, and the tourists want to come and see bison. They want to see antelope. They love to see any kind of wild animal like a coyote. And so they just haven't made it a priority to limit the number of coyotes out there. And so what you have a place like Antelope Island where there's so many bucks, the rut shows up, and these bucks just go to town on each other. They get broken up, they fight, and even some of the biggest deer, one of the bigger deer on the island last year, he got wounded during the rut, and that's bad news for a buck out there, because as soon as a buck starts to show any kind of illness or weakness at all, those coyotes will swarm and usually kill them.
Oh, jeez. They got to do something about that. They can't just let them, because you let coyotes multiply like that, they'll never stop. I mean, pretty soon it's going to be detrimental.
Yeah, yeah, that's those of us that love mule deer, we really think that they need to be limited. Those that love all animals and love the tourists, they think that it's a great opportunity for tourists to see those animals. So there's two
Well,
sides to the story. I know which side I'm on.
yeah, I think you and I are on the same side. So, you were saying in the rut, a lot of these bucks get broken up, and I'm sitting here looking at a picture of you holding up a huge shed antler. Do a lot of those sheds get busted up that you guys find out there?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest shed I've ever found off the island was from a buck I've watched for quite a few years. And I was out there on the designated shed hunt, and I found one of my favorite bucks, his shed that goes 95 inches broken. It would have probably been 110 inches if he hadn't broken off a couple of big inlines. And so even if you watching some of the hunting videos um, from past years when they've hunted deer out there, you might even see videos where the night before the hunt, their number one target buck that they want to go after will break something.
Oh, wow.
And so they might move on to buck number two just because buck number one got broken up even the night before the first day they're allowed to hunt. And so it's the buck to doe ratio out there. I think there's more bucks than does because they have multiple times removed does to go and transplant them at other areas around the state. So you have a limited number of does with a large number of bucks. It gets pretty nasty out there, but
Yeah.
fun for those of us that are out there watching them.
Heck yeah, that'd be a blast to watch those things fight all day long. Man. You talked about a dedicated shed season. So in Utah, I think it's like, well, no, you guys don't have a limit. So here in Colorado, we can't start shed hunting until May 1st. And I know Utah doesn't have that. I don't think many people know about the dedicated shed hunting on Antelope Island. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's gotten more and more popular over the years, but you are not allowed to shed hunt freely on Antelope Island, even when the rest of the state is opened. Like I said earlier, the island actually requires that you stay on designated trails. If you leave those designated trails, they can cite you. And so sometimes you'd love to get closer to the deer to photograph them or video them, and you just have to hike where you can and hope you can get good footage. But as far as the shed hunting goes, they allow 2 days a year of shed hunting. And what they do is they let 100 people go on the east side of the island on a Monday early in March, and then usually on a Tuesday, they let 100 people go over to the west side of the island and shed hunt over there. In the past, they've done different methods of how they selected those 100 people each day. They've had days where they would put the permits online and they'd sell out within 1 or 2 minutes. Usually you have to pay about a $50 fee to go on the shed hunt. But it's been so popular in recent years, just with social media and the whole shed hunting craze in general,
Yeah.
where so many people have wanted to do it. So what they've required you to do is show up the day of the shed hunt. People take off work, people drive in from out of state all over the place. You show up in the parking lot outside the gate to drive across to the island, and you put your name in a hat with all 300 plus people, and they draw 100 names out. And as soon as your name gets drawn out, you get to jump in your vehicle and you get to take off. So it's
So you want to be number one and not number 100 of that list.
Yeah, like this last year, I didn't get drawn at all the second or the first day, and my brother and I got drawn. We put in together. We got drawn number 93 and 94
Oh my
on the west side. So by the time we get over there, it's feasible that the sheds are already picked up before we even hit the ground over there.
Well, especially if you can only go on designated trails. If you can't get off those trails, people probably...
Well, during the shed hunt, they give you full access.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Yeah, they give you, if you're one of the lucky ones that get the permit, you get full access on those days, and it's a great time. It's worth, I love going out there, and people find giant sheds. It's fun to see them. I've probably held hundreds of sheds from the island over the years, scored a ton of them. It's really educational for me to hold that shed in my hand that I've been watching on the hoof all those months to know, is it really as big as it looks? Is it smaller? Because there's so many variabilities out there with the deer. Some have huge bodies, some have smaller bodies, smaller ears, bigger ears, and I've had bucks that I just didn't think were quite as big. And all of a sudden I hold their shed and realize I greatly underestimated them. Mm-hmm. And then other bucks that I just thought were giant, and you hold their shed and it's underwhelming in the hand. But I mean, it's a pretty neat deal. Lots of sheds get picked up. Unfortunately, With as popular as it is, and as big as some of those sheds are, there's a good handful of people that are willing to break the rules out there. And so a few years back, for example, I had 7 different sheds glassed up from the trails and the roads, and not a single one of them made it until the shed hunt day before somebody snuck in there illegally and picked them up. But that gets frustrating. But I mean,
Yeah,
it's going to happen. People break rules everywhere, and
it's how it
but it's
is.
just frustrating for the rest of us that are wanting to keep the rules. Every year, the guy that's drawing the names reads on. He has a list of people that they've busted on the island for trespassing or picking up sheds early, and they're not allowed to participate in the shed hunt. So if their
Oh,
name gets drawn and they're on the list, then they're not allowed to go, and they're usually cited and fined. But the amount that they catch compared to those, I think, breaking the rules is pretty minuscule.
wow,
But
that's
it's frustrating if you pick up a big shed, for example, legally on the shed hunt, and the match never surfaces. You can never even find the person with the match because it disappeared early because I've had it glassed up or whatnot. And there have been times where later on I know sheds that were picked up early, they surface on social media, but it's at that point it's not worth saying anything about it or
well,
whatever. You just go out and you have fun. To me, in the end, it's all about fun. It's all about our passion for deer.
yeah. Yeah, it is, and it's sad because half the fun of going shed hunting is bringing it back and showing your buddies, check this out, and put some tape on it, measuring it out and checking it out, and just telling people about it, telling the story about it. And this is what happened. This is how I found it. Stuff like that. Like that's half the fun of shed hunting. You do it illegally, you don't get to do all that, and I think you lose half the fun.
Yeah, that's a good point. How many people have sheds in their basement or somewhere in their house that they really just can't show anybody other than maybe a close family member or friends at
Yeah.
risk of it,
Yeah, that kind
you
of bummed
know,
me out a little bit. I like showing off that stuff. Not that
knowledge.
I have a ton of it, but
But it's a lot of fun, even on years where a year ago I didn't get my name drawn at all.
oh no.
But I'd still spend some time out there. It's fun cruising the roads, and you see people coming off. You get to check out their sheds. And they'll show me what shed they have. I can tell them exactly which buck it is. I can send them photos so they know what the match looks like. And it's a lot of fun. To me, it's a place where I've learned how to field judge big mule deer, to know how they change from year to year. Like I said, it's kind of the ultimate study ground for me for mule deer.
Well, yeah, and I'll bet you're able to, like you just said, field judge. I'll bet you. So when you go hunting in southern Utah, or really wherever you go hunting, I bet you've got a lot of skills just learning from that you've learned from doing this. That you can field judge a deer and say, "Yep, that deer is a 160 buck," and be pretty spot on with that.
Yes, I've seen enough big deer. I've held enough big sheds, hundreds and hundreds in my lifetime, and scored probably hundreds. That I've gotten to know what a big antler looks like. Obviously, there's variability that comes into field judging mule deer. Um, there's articles and books and things written about that, but it definitely, the more deer you look over, the more big racks, big antlers you have in your hands, and can score and learn about what it takes to grow to a certain size. It definitely helps deer on the hoof.
Oh yeah, and you
The
can't.
one thing that,
Go ahead.
sorry about that. The one thing that the island kind of does to me is it kind of makes me jaded, though, because you go out to a general unit and you see a 160 buck, and it's hard to get excited anymore
Yeah,
because
guys like me
I've
see a
seen so
160
many
go
big deer.
crazy.
Those are the ones I just keep driving on by on the island. But on your general units, that's not a deer you see every day.
No, no. Like I said, if I see a 160 buck, I'm pretty excited. I'm gonna stop and look at that thing for a while, and put my phone scope on it for a while, and
Right.
yeah, guys like you just drive past them. Being a shed hunter like you are, and like you said, you've handled hundreds and thousands of sheds. What's your thoughts about? There's these people making a living shed hunting and using social media for showing off their sheds. What's your thoughts on all that?
Um, if there's a lot of people actually making a living shed hunting,
I guess I shouldn't say a
I want
lot.
to I want to talk I want to talk to them.
I know
I mean,
there's
I
a
know there are
few.
guys that like to shed hunt that are involved in the industry that do a lot of other things and have to produce content and find other ways to make money. But it's crazy how big it's blown up over the last 10 years or so. I think because of social media and shed hunting is something I've enjoyed all my life. But it's probably within the last 10 years that I, have really gotten to know what a big shed looks like and become I'm just crazy about big mule deer sheds. And so I, just like a lot of other people, I enjoy going shed hunting. I'm kind of at that point where when I do hunt, I've passed up a lot of good bucks in recent years, hoping for a giant buck, which still hasn't happened for me. Um, but I've passed up quite a few bucks that I've just let live for another day because I do enjoy going out and hoping that they survive this season and I can go pick up their sheds later on and see what they might be next year. And I have nothing against people that hunt for meat. Obviously, everything I hunt, I eat that, and my family enjoys it. But I usually have a cow elk tag or something else that fills the freezer full of meat. And so when I do get to hunt deer, I'm not in a hurry as much as I used to be to go and just kill. I don't feel like I have to on any particular hunt that I have to kill anymore. And so I just love the experience. It would be a debate in my mind right now whether or not I'd love to, kill a giant buck or find that buck shed if I had the option to choose. I'm kind of where I love sheds so much now, that big sheds, that I'd probably pick. I would rather find a big giant buck sheds fresh brown on the ground than I would kill that buck during the hunt.
Wow.
And some people might call me crazy for that,
Yeah, they
but
might. They might.
they would. It's not a matter of if they might. They would call me crazy, but I would love to watch that buck all through the hunt time, all through the winter, and then see those sheds hit the ground and hold them in my hand and just have them that way, knowing that buck's still walking.
Yeah, he's gonna do it again next year.
Curious about what he might be next year. That kind of stuff just gets me excited.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because yeah, you pick up a big set of sheds, whether it be mule deer or elk or whatever. Yeah, you know that he's well, you don't know, but the probability of him being there next year doing the same thing is likely. So no, I may call you crazy in that, but I understand where you're coming from in that.
I'm crazy. There's a few like me out there, but not so many. Don't get me wrong. I love to hunt them, and I'm always gonna keep hunting them. But there's
Yeah.
something I've kind of gotten to where I collect big mule deer sheds over the years. So some I've picked up myself, and others that I've built up a collection over time. And to me, nothing gets me as excited as a big brown mule deer shed. And so I've traded, I've purchased, I've done different things to acquire some big sheds over the years. And that's one of my hobbies. That's what I like to do. People collect weird things. I collect big sheds. And it's been fun over the years. I kind of started out some years back. I had a big pile of poundage antler that I went and sold. I turned that money into some big sheds, and then found more poundage sheds, bought another big shed, traded a couple of big sheds for an even bigger shed. Found a rack or a shed for sale that I knew I could make money on, and I would flip that and then buy a bigger shed. And it's just evolved over the years to now it's really hard to add anything to my collection because the kind I keep now are, either usually 90-inch or bigger typical type sheds that are brown, or, non-typical sheds over 100 inches. So I don't add as many to my collection as I used to, but I'm always looking. It's just been to me, my wife's allowed it to be my kind of my play account as well, because these sheds aren't cheap when they're big.
Yeah, they're expensive.
They're sheds that are hundreds, even thousands of dollars is what they're worth. And I'm fortunate that I got this little collection of sheds. If I want a new hunting rifle, I could just sell one of my big sheds and go buy a new hunting rifle. And it's just kind of my play savings account, if you will. And but even better than money, it's big sheds.
Right,
So,
exactly. Well, like you said, people collect stuff. I think everybody has something that they collect. Maybe not everybody, but a good chunk of people have things that they collect, and it gets that way. You start collecting one thing, and then you want something that's a little bit better, so you barter a little bit, you get something better, you get and just keep growing from there. So it's kind of interesting that you do it that way, though, because most people, I think they're trying to find sheds for the poundage. They're gonna get as many as they can. They're gonna sell it for as much as they can, and just make money of it. And I think that's kind of cool that you do it as a more of a collector's item than
yeah,
as a
I
money
mean,
maker.
going back to the elk versus mule deer, I mean, I love to find elk sheds because they add up faster as far as poundage prices.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to hike for mule deer sheds, hoping that I find the big sheds that I like to keep, and they're so few and far between when you're talking about that size of shed.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I started collecting. Is I started doing the math. I said, this is the type of shed I love to have, and I might pay a lot of money for it, but if I take into account how many trips I could take from one state to the other, one end of the state to the other, hiking, days off work, gas money, I could spend 50 days shed hunting straight during the prime time of the year in all the best areas, and there's no guarantee I'm going to find a shed as big as the kind I like to collect.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So to me, it was kind of a math equation. I like big sheds. I like really big sheds, and so I'm just going to acquire one here, one there, and build up a collection over time, and always have some that I can put my hands on.
Yeah. Well, mule deer are more unique, for the most part, are more unique than elk. Elk are pretty similar across the board, but it seems like mule deer get more unique. In fact, I was looking at one of yours the other day. I can't remember what you called it. It was like Edward Scissorhands or something like that. Do you remember that shed?
Yeah, I do. That's actually a shed that a big 108-inch shed that I got out of British Columbia, Canada, actually, and
Oh, wow.
it's by far the best color of any shed I own. It's so dark brown, it's black
Mm-hmm.
almost, and there's an extra point coming off every time. So the G2 has a split, the G3, the G4, they all have splits, and they just look like scissors.
It does, and it looks just so
So
cool and unique, and that's just not something you normally get with elk, but that deer is, I mean, not that you see that on every single deer, but it seems like mule deer have more of those unique properties to them with the way they grow their antlers.
I totally agree, and that's one of the reasons I'm so crazy about mule deer sheds. Obviously, there's elk guys out there that would argue to their grave that that's not the case.
It's true.
But that's what keeps me excited about it. Every single one's different. I have so many different colored sheds. I have one big shed that I got from a guy that found it on the island, a buck I'd watched, a buck I'd loved, and he got lucky enough to get drawn early, and he picked up the shed, and I was later able to buy it from him. But it was picked up the spring after. I don't know if you remember, several years back, there was a big fire on Antelope Island.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Much of the island, and this buck rubbed in one of the burn areas, and the antler it's just charcoal gray, and one of the coolest colored sheds that I have, and I love it because it tells a story. It tells these antlers, it tells where they rub, what type of terrain they might live in, what type of vegetation they spend most of their time in, and just cool things like that we notice, those of us that are crazy about deer. Those are the things we notice. And in the collector world, a big shed's a big shed, but when you're collecting and willing to pay a lot of money for those sheds, you're kind of picky. Now I'm at a point now where I usually, for my personal collection, I'm only looking for sheds that are fresh brown, usually without broken points. And so it gets hard.
So if you come across a hard white while you're out in somewhere in Utah shed hunting, are you picking it up or are you leaving it?
I always pick them up.
Oh, okay.
I'll pick any shed up for myself, and I have some big sheds I've found in my personal collection that are hard white, and I love them. I love them like crazy. Hard white sheds. In fact, I think some really slick hard white sheds might even look cooler than some of the browns.
Yeah, that's true.
But as far as if you're collecting and you just want to have certain types of sheds in your personal collection, you can be a little more picky,
Mm-hmm.
on what you're willing to pay for, what you're willing to keep over time.
Yeah, for sure.
The better condition they're in, the more valuable they become.
Yeah.
It's feasible that one giant brown shed, if it were to sit out for a year, it could lose several hundreds of dollars of value in 1 year on the collector market.
Wow.
Just because of that condition change over the course of 1 year. And then if that shed were to go to where it's more cracked and even chalky, it becomes worth way less, even if it's a giant shed. So it's a weird market, the collector market for mule deer sheds on the real big stuff, but it's fun. It's something that keeps me excited, that I'm passionate about. And
I think it's something that not a lot of people are in. I think a lot of people shed hunt, at least the people I know shed hunt because they want, like I said, they want that poundage. And so you're kind of that unique person that I've had the opportunity to talk with about it being a collector's item and being in the collector's world of sheds and the money that goes along with that. And but really, that's collecting. I mean, if you're going to collect
yeah, I
something,
mean,
it's going to cost
there's a
money.
lot of guys out there that know what big sheds are, and they're looking for themselves, and they'd never even think in a million years to give up or sell for any price
Mm-hmm.
some of the giant sheds they've picked up, because they love them as well, and they have a history having picked up those sheds. But there's also people that can pick up giant sheds, and if that shed they just picked up last week, they could sell it and turn that into a new spotting scope, they might be willing to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting. I know a lot of people that do collect the big giant sheds. I mean, there's a pretty select handful of those that do collect the real big stuff. One of the more notables is I've gotten to know quite well. I don't know if you know Jeff and Dave Harrow up in Tremont, and
I don't.
friends of mine. They own Kent's Optics
Oh yeah. Okay.
in Tremont in Utah,
Uh-huh.
but they also have the Instagram page called Shed Tours.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
They've even had booths at the expo, the hunting expo there in Salt Lake City every year. They have, I mean, just a world-class collection of insane giant mule deer sheds, and they've been collecting for decades. And so you can imagine, if they were smart enough to get into the giant sheds years and years ago, that they got a head start on a lot of us,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people like me. But it's fun to be able to go up and see some of their sheds or see them on display at the expos, and it's fun.
It is. It's an interesting world. It's a completely different world than I think. Like I said, most people I talk to aren't in that world, and so it is an interesting one. Hey, I know I need to be letting you go here pretty soon, but I did want to chat with you a little bit about your Instagram page. Well, just really social media in general. You seem like a different person on social media than most of these other people that are. And I don't want to put people in classes or anything like that, but it seems like there's a lot of people trying to make a business on social media and do these huge things, and it doesn't seem like you're trying to do that. Although your social media pages are huge, and a lot of people have come to look at them. But what has been kind of your goal of your social media page? Has it been to be this huge, big social media platform, or is it just something that you enjoy doing?
So I didn't think for a second that I would build a big social media page. I was just passionate about mule deer, about wildlife. I've taken a lot of photos and videos over the years. And so when Instagram kind of first got started, I just shared some of the things I enjoyed, mainly big mule deer, big sheds, hunting photos, some of those things. And lo and behold, people started liking my stuff, following my page, and it's just grown over the years. I never once intended for that to happen. It wasn't something I sought after, and it has its pros and cons, I guess. But I've purposefully tried to keep my page something that is separate from anything I do in the world to make money. I haven't tried to go out and get sponsorships or to make money or to push products of other companies. I just thought, if I'm going to do this and I'm going to kind of remain true to myself and what I'm really passionate about, then I'm just going to share what I love. And if other people enjoy it, hopefully I get to know them and build some of those relationships that you really can through social media. But my goal is not to build a certain number of followers. My goal is not to make a dime. It's just to share what I love and connect with people out there who have the same goals and passions that I do.
So what would your advice be to these kids that are trying to start these big social media pages? Is it something that they should just go full force into, or is it something you feel like they should try to find a little bit of balance in things?
Well, I'm a believer. I mean, I'm a mental health professional, and so I work with a lot of veterans at the Veterans Hospital where I work, and help them as they're going through difficult times in their life. And one of the things I always preach is that it's about balance. And you got to really analyze, like, what's your motivation behind wanting to have a big following on Instagram? What's your motivation? And if your motivation is to just be popular, to be famous, to try to make money, then there's a good chance you're out of balance and you're not in it for the right reasons. Obviously, businesses in this day and age, they have to be on social media. That's one of the main ways you promote your service, you promote your product. You have to be involved. But for the average Joe, I think we really have to watch ourselves how involved we get with social media, because it can suck you in and drain the life out of you. I know I personally take 2-3 week breaks at a time just to make sure I'm doing it for the right reasons. My motto when I talk to people about it is, if you wouldn't do that activity or go to that place or be where you are at if social media didn't exist, then I think you really need to look at your motivation behind what you're doing. I know for myself, if social media didn't exist, I'd be out in the mountains, on Antelope Island, anywhere else I go, looking at big bucks. I'd be shed hunting. I'd be collecting big sheds. I'd be doing all these things. And I've just kind of tried to stay true to that concept. You know, I want to wake up in the morning, and if I want to mix my warrior fuel with my mountain ops, you know, I don't have anybody telling me I can't do that. You know, but I love the people that get over involved in it. Actually, myself and a few friends, we experience a lot of comedy as we watch the drama that goes on in social media, and it's just hilarious.
It is.
But I try to avoid the drama. I try to just share my stuff and have a good time with it, really.
Well, and you made a very good point in that. Would you do this if you weren't posting it on social media? And some of us older guys that we didn't have social media growing up, it was just, we did it because we love doing it, and it needs to be your passion. It needs to be what you absolutely love to do. If you're doing it because you want to post a picture on Instagram and get somebody to let you sell their product or push their product or make a little bit of money, that it, and then that ruins your life goals as far as what you want to do for a career or a family or things like that. Like you said, you got to have balance in your life, and
Right.
you got to do what, make everything even, and find things that you enjoy, but also be able to support your family and do those things. And I think a lot of people get sucked into the social media side of things. They think that is gonna make their living, that they're gonna make millions of dollars. And yes, I admit there are people that have done that and are doing that, and kudos to them for what they've been able to do. But like you said, average Joes like us, that's not many of us are going to do it. The percentage of people that do it is very minimal. So
Yeah, what ends up happening is you get a false sense of what the real world's like, and even in the hunting industry, if you're judging that based on social media, because we all know social media it's not real life. I don't know if you've ever gone on a shed hunting trip or gone hunting with somebody who is all about posting every second of every adventure on social media, but it becomes hugely distracting.
yeah,
I mean, you might be out with someone and they got to spend 20 minutes putting their binoculars on a rock, letting the sun gleam off them the right way so they can get a shot for their Instagram page to let everybody know they're on the mountain glassing that morning. And it's like, I mean, it's exhausting. And what a lot of these young kids I don't think understand, or older people that want to build a big following and kind of be that famous person in the industry, is that for a lot of these people that do have the big pages, that do make money in the industry, even their social media, it becomes a grind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for someone that makes a lot of money off of a social media page or pushing their products on social media or a YouTube site, it's a lot of pressure and it's a grind putting out new content.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because once the views stop, once the content slows down, then income stream also slows down. And so that's never something I wanted to be involved in. I think there's a place for it. It can do a lot of good out there, social media. But my advice is just be real. Don't believe that every person out there is killing 200-inch bucks but you. I mean, it's just do the very best you can with whatever lot in life you have and your abilities to hunt, because social media really brings into light what in the world of psychology we might call relative deprivation. And it's this idea that, you know, we tend to compare ourselves to those people that we see in our, you know, our direct, however big our circle is, whether it be in, you know, in-person circles or through social media. We tend to compare ourselves, and it's easy in social media to think that my life must relatively suck compared to all these other people that I'm seeing that appear like they're hunting 5 days out of the week and I'm just home working a regular job. And what they don't realize is I've had people message me in the past saying, hey, that's pretty exciting that you get to go out and you get to film these big bucks, you know, all week long. And what they don't realize is I might take an 8-hour hike on a Saturday, film 10 different bucks and post them over a 3-4 week period. And those all happen in one day trip.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not that I'm out there every single day getting a new video to share that day. You know, and so it's distorted. Social media is distorted. It's not real life. And I think we need to go back to that idea that if you wouldn't do it without social media, then, you know, should we really be doing it? Is it really healthy? Right. and helping us to achieve whatever our goals are?
And this is our passion. I mean, hunting is a passion. And if it ever becomes my job, you know, because I love my job. I love what I do. But it is a job. It's something that I have to do to support my family, and that can get stressful at times. And I don't want hunting to ever be like that. And even with this podcast that I've created, you know, I don't want deadlines of when I have to have a show out. I don't want really any pressure. I just like talking about hunting with really good guys and gals, and, you know, I just enjoy doing it. And so if it ever gets to that point that there is pressure, that this is my job and I have to meet this deadline, like you said, with some of these people putting out content, it's a grind, and it does become their full-time job. And with that full-time job comes stress and a little bit of, you know, kind of ill feelings towards what you're doing. And I would never want that towards hunting, because hunting is, again, going back, it is my passion. So
it is easy to get sucked in like that. And yeah,
especially for you that have a lot of followers.
Yeah, you know, and I hope that we realize in this country how blessed we truly are, that we can actually be stressed out over whether or not I'm getting the best hunting pics or as good as someone else on social media. I don't know if you've ever tried. I've been in quite a few different countries during my lifetime, and I've tried to explain to people of different cultures, even people in our own country, that what I like to do for fun. I like to collect sheds. I like to go shed hunting, and their jaw just kind of hits the floor. And, you know, especially people that live outside of our country, Try explaining to someone in a third world country that you like to go shed hunting for fun when they're out there grinding every single day just trying to put food on the table. You quickly begin to realize that, this isn't something we have to do anymore to survive. We don't have to hunt to survive. We're blessed to live in a place where we can go out and enjoy those hobbies and be a part of that and have it be our passion. I mean, how blessed are we to live in a place where we can do that? And some of our bigger stressors might be whether or not, I get the buck I'm going after this year. And that's a pretty good life, in my opinion.
That puts it all in perspective, Jason. It really does. I mean, we get so caught up in the size of deer that we're shooting, or the shed that we're finding, or the perfect video clip to post on social media. And yeah, there are people out there that are still struggling to find that next meal. So I appreciate that, man. I really do. That puts things into perspective, and I hope it does for everybody else that's listening.
Yeah, let's just have fun with it. Let's just enjoy it.
Yeah. It looks like you, and it looks like you are. I think you are enjoying it, and it looks like it comes easy for you on social media. Anyways, everything's easy on social media.
I have a good time with it. I put a lot of time into, trying to get as good a footage as I can of some of these giant bucks and sharing some unique clips. And I take pride in what I put out there, but it has nothing to do with my identity or who I am. I don't use that to promote myself. I'm fortunate that social media and having a bigger following has allowed me to meet a lot of cool people. Mm-hmm. That's what I love from social media, is I have met so many cool people. I mean, that's how you and I met.
Yep.
Some of my closest friends now that I hunt with or shed hunt with, I met through social media. And that's some of the great things that come out of it, as long as we keep all the other stuff in check.
Yeah, and that is the best thing that comes out of it. And that's really the only reason, or one of the only reasons I'm doing this podcast, is to meet good people and to learn from them, learn from people like you that do things that I don't do. And so, yeah, that really is the best thing about social media. There's a lot of negative that comes with it, but that one positive right there is worth it all. Well, Jason, we better get this thing closed up.
Yeah,
I've been keeping you on for a while, and I know you got to go to work tomorrow and got some things planned, and need to let you go for the night. But before we go, if you wouldn't mind just letting everybody know where they can find you if they haven't found you already.
Okay. I think the best place to find me is probably on Instagram. I don't share a lot of my hunting stuff on Facebook or anywhere else, or on YouTube, but on Instagram, my username is @OutdoorSeg. That's outdoor SEEG. That Seg is part of my last name, which is Seegmiller. So Jason Seegmiller. And follow me, interact with me, teach me things. I'm all ears. I'm not so expert that I think I'm more knowledgeable, than anybody else out there. So if anybody has questions on the things I love to do, if I can help anybody with scoring antlers, judging big deer, whatever it might be, if I'm good at it, I love to share the knowledge that I have with those that are learning. Well, and I'm grateful to those that teach me along the way as well.
Well, you're a wealth of information. The couple times that you and I have talked, I've learned a ton, and I appreciate the things that you've shared with me and have taught me even over just this past week. So I really appreciate it. So, well, all right, man. Well, I will let you get going. Thank you for jumping on. Appreciate you, and hopefully we can get together soon.
Thanks, Taryn. Have a great night.
You too. Thanks, man.